My parents forced me to lose weight. For my sister's wedding, but after. This story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. I was sitting at the dinner table when Bonnie dropped the bomb. The room had been filled with the usual chatter, laughter, and casual banter as we caught up on family matters. It was supposed to be a celebration. My younger sister's engagement, a moment of joy, of family coming together to share in her happiness. But it wasn't that simple for me. It never was. I had been mentally preparing myself for this family gathering for weeks, even months. I knew they would all be talking about Bonnie's engagement, about how perfect everything was. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have prepared for, was the sudden sting of her words. "So, are you still fat?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock curiosity. I froze. It felt like a slap to the face, like a cruel reminder of everything I had tried to bury. The room went silent for a split second, everyone looking at me, waiting for my response. Bonnie's smirk was like a dagger to the heart, as if she were daring me to react, daring me to be hurt by her words. "Bonnie!" my mother exclaimed, her voice full of feigned concern. But I knew the truth. My mother's concern was always surface level, never deep enough to understand the real hurt. My father, on the other hand, had already tuned out, his attention back on his phone as he scrolled through the latest news. The words Bonnie had just thrown at me hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and thick. How had I gone from being the proud older sister, the one who protected her, to this, to someone who was nothing more than the punchline of a joke at a family gathering? I tried to laugh it off, to brush it off like I had so many times before. But inside, I was crumbling. My stomach churned. I could feel the years of self-doubt, the years of being taunted and bullied, rising to the surface. I wanted to shout at them all. I wanted to tell them how I felt, how their judgment had broken me for years. I wanted to tell them that it wasn't just Bonnie who made me feel like a failure. It was my parents, too. But I didn't. Instead, I just smiled awkwardly, trying to brush off Bonnie's comment with a half-hearted joke about how I was still working on myself. But inside, I was dying. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream out that I had worked harder than anyone knew, that I had fought battles they didn't understand. But it wasn't enough, was it? No matter how hard I worked, how much weight I lost, nothing was ever enough for them. I wasn't enough. Growing up, I had always been the bigger kid. While others played sports and ran around, I was the one sitting on the sidelines, too conscious of my size to even try. My classmates made sure to remind me of that, calling me names, making jokes at my expense, and excluding me from their games. I tried to escape into books, into a world where I didn't have to worry about what I looked like. But the real world was always there, waiting to remind me that I wasn't like everyone else. Bonnie, on the other hand, had it easy. She was popular, charismatic, the kind of person who could walk into a room and light it up with her smile. She was everything I wasn't. She could walk into any social situation and instantly be the center of attention. People loved her, admired her, and I loved her. I looked up to her. I was proud to be her older sister, even if she didn't always seem to feel the same way. But as we got older, things changed. Bonnie started distancing herself from me. She became more popular, more outgoing, while I stayed stuck in my quiet, reserved world. The teasing from my classmates didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. I became the butt of every joke, and the laughter that followed was deafening. Bonnie started hanging out with the popular crowd, leaving me behind. I remember the day she first started ignoring me at school. We were walking down the hallway, and I reached out to talk to her. But she didn't look at me. She didn't even acknowledge me. Instead, she laughed with her friends, leaving me standing there, feeling small and invisible. That hurt more than anything else. Because Bonnie wasn't just ignoring me, she was actively participating in the cruelty that had been aimed at me for years. She would laugh when her friends made jokes about me, and sometimes she would join in. I couldn't understand why she would do that. She was my sister. She was supposed to have my back, to protect me. But instead, she was just another part of the world that made me feel like I wasn't good enough. And then there was my parents. They saw it, didn't they? They saw how Bonnie treated me, how the teasing from my classmates had become a way of life for me. But they never said anything. Every time I tried to talk to them about it, they dismissed my concerns. They told me I needed to grow thicker skin, that I was too sensitive, that I should just ignore it. But how could I? How could I ignore the constant barrage of insults, the constant reminder that I was different? The only time I ever felt truly seen by my parents was when it came to my grades. I was always the smart one, the bookish one, the one who excelled academically. It was the one area where I could find validation, where I could show them that I was worth something. But even then, it wasn't enough. They never understood that I didn't want to be the smart one. I wanted to be seen as more than just my grades. But my achievements became another tool they used to put Bonnie down, to make her feel inadequate in comparison. As I grew older, I tried to find ways to cope. I threw myself into my studies, into my work, and eventually into my weight loss journey. It wasn't easy. Every step of the way, I had to fight against not just my own self-doubt, but the constant judgment of others. I worked hard to lose weight, to improve my body. But no matter how much weight I lost, it never felt like enough. It wasn't until after Bonnie's engagement announcement that I realized something crucial. I had been doing all of this for the wrong reasons. I hadn't been losing weight for myself. I had been doing it for them, to get their approval, to finally make them proud of me. And that was when everything changed. I started to do it for me. I joined a gym, hired a personal trainer, and completely revamped my diet. This time, I wasn't trying to please anyone else. I was doing this for myself, and it was the best decision I ever made. I began to see changes, not just physically, but mentally. I was gaining confidence, I was starting to believe in myself, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life. 2 weeks before Bonnie's wedding, I received another invitation from my parents. They wanted me to come to lunch to finalize the plans for the big day, but I wasn't sure I could handle it. I didn't want to be ridiculed again, not when I had worked so hard to get to where I was. I wasn't the same person I had been. I wasn't the awkward, insecure sister who was always the target of their jokes. I had changed, and I didn't want them to make me feel small again. But after thinking about it, I realized that maybe I should show up. Not for them, but for me. They hadn't seen the new me, and I wanted them to see the woman I had become. When I walked into my parents' house, I could see the shock in their eyes. They couldn't believe it was me. My weight loss was obvious, but it was more than just physical. I had gained confidence, strength, and a sense of self-worth that they had never bothered to acknowledge before. But Bonnie, she didn't even recognize me at first. When she did, she was surprised, but there was something else in her eyes, a mix of jealousy and disbelief. She couldn't hide it. And then she made a comment about my appearance. "Wow," she said, "I didn't expect you to look this good. I didn't know you had that jawline underneath all that fat." I felt a rush of anger, but I held it back. I didn't need her validation. "Bonnie," I said calmly, "I've always been beautiful." Losing weight just enhanced my features. Her face twisted in discomfort, and for the first time, I saw her uneasy. She didn't know how to respond, and I was okay with that. I stood there, feeling the weight of my own transformation, the physical, mental, and emotional journey that had led me to this point. The room was still, silent, as my family tried to process what they were seeing. I couldn't help but notice how Bonnie's expression shifted from shock to something I couldn't quite place. Resentment, maybe. Or jealousy. It didn't matter anymore. It was clear that I had finally become something they couldn't ignore, something they couldn't control. Bonnie's face flushed as she tried to compose herself, but her eyes betrayed her. She looked at me like I was someone she didn't recognize, someone she couldn't quite place in her carefully constructed world of beauty and perfection. I had changed, and so had the dynamic between us. Her smirk returned, but this time it was forced, awkward. "Well, I didn't expect that," she said, looking me up and down, trying to hide the disdain that leaked through her words. "You look different. I guess you lost a lot of weight, huh?" I stood tall, my posture a reflection of the strength I had built over the months. "I didn't just lose weight, Bonnie," I replied, my voice steady. "I found myself, and that's something you'll never understand. Losing weight doesn't change who I am. It just brought out the version of me that was always there." The silence that followed was heavy, and for the first time, I felt like the tables had turned. Bonnie, the golden child, the one who had always been the center of attention, looked uncomfortable. It wasn't just the weight I had lost. It was the way I had come into my own, the way I was finally standing up for myself in a way that I never had before. The power dynamics had shifted, and for once, I wasn't the one cowering under her cruel remarks. But I didn't stop there. I looked at my parents, who had been so quick to join in on Bonnie's teasing and ridicule, the same parents who had dismissed my concerns, who had made me feel invisible. "And you," I said, turning to them, "you were never there for me. You always prioritized Bonnie, always saw her as the one who could do no wrong. You never understood what it was like to be me, to be constantly judged, mocked, and ridiculed. And even now, with all my hard work, you still can't see me for who I truly am." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he didn't speak. My mother just sat there, looking at me with a mix of confusion and regret. They had no idea how much their words had hurt me, how much their blind favoritism had torn me apart over the years. "Why do you keep pushing me?" I continued, my voice shaking with emotion now. "Why do you always make me feel like I'm not enough? I've worked so hard to become the person I am today, and you still treat me like I'm not good enough for you." Bonnie's face hardened, and I could see the resentment in her eyes. "You're just trying to make everything about you, aren't you?" she spat, her words laced with venom. "It's always about you. You've lost weight, so now you think you're better than me?" I didn't flinch. "No, Bonnie," I said, my voice calm but firm. "It's not about being better than you. It's about being better than the person I was. And I'm done playing by your rules. I'm done letting you make me feel like I'm less than everyone else." Her eyes filled with anger, but she didn't say anything more. She just glared at me, her jealousy palpable. I had done something she could never do, something she would never be able to understand. I had found my strength, and it had nothing to do with how I looked. It was about who I had become. That evening, I left the family gathering feeling more liberated than I had ever felt in my life. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need Bonnie's validation. I had proven to myself that I was worthy, that I was enough, and no one could take that from me. As I walked away from that dinner, I felt the weight of the years of bullying, the years of trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine, lift off my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I was free. I wasn't going to go to Bonnie's wedding. I didn't need to. I had already made my own peace with who I was. My transformation wasn't just about losing weight. It was about losing the need for validation from anyone. I had spent too many years trying to make my family see me. But now, I was done seeking their approval. I was done seeking anyone's approval. Bonnie, my parents, they would have to live with their own choices. I had finally learned that I wasn't responsible for their happiness, and that was a lesson I would carry with me forever. So, what do you think? Have you ever had to fight for your own sense of worth? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose yourself over the toxic people around you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're all on our own journey, and sometimes the hardest battles we face are with the people closest to us. But you are enough, just as you are, and no one can take that from you. Let's talk about it.